Hello everyone, I'm Jose Pita, Artistic Director of the Texas Guitar Society in Mexico, and I'm pleased to present today a very special guest, composer and guitarist Allan, who's here to talk about his new project, King Cuicatl. He's been working in this project for several years here over at Mexico, and he's going to be telling us all about it. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jose. Thanks a lot for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, to start off, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. What would you? Well, I'm from America. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Right.
I'm a composer, multi-instrumentalist. I started music as a cellist.
Right.
So that's my main instrument. I started when I was like 3 years old, and these days I play a variety of instruments and I write music and do big strange projects.
Strange and amazing projects, mind you. How did you end up here in Mexico?
I don't know. I mean, that's always the first question is like why here? Because I'm based in New York City,
Right.
and it's pretty uncommon, I think, to go to Mexico to do a project. I don't know, from what I've heard, and so I don't know. So a lot of it, I don't really make decisions in my music. For example, I'm not one to kind of premeditate and plan a project and then say, oh, let's do a project based on blah blah blah, or let's do this. Like I try to stay focused in the music and bring that as far as it needs to go, and then I sort of revolve my actual life around the music. So I kind of, if my music requires me to go to another part of the world or change my hairstyle or change my way of dressing or do whatever I need to do to make sense of the music I'm writing, but the music is the priority. So in this case, I was focused on music, I wrote it, and I realized that to make the most sense of this project and to give it sort of structure and meaning, I would have to go, in this case, to Mexico and build an ensemble of Mexican musicians and start dressing up like an Aztec king and traveling around the country screaming and singing.
Right, okay. Talk about being married to your job, right?
Yeah.
Okay, by the way, he's done playing himself. He's an amazing musician and he does play a lot of instruments. If you're interested, you can look him up over at Spotify. And his albums, he recorded everything himself. So he's even an audio engineer. So anyway, what was the origin, the main idea of this project, King Cuicatl, that brought you here?
Well, that again is something that I try to trace back and try to understand. But there were a lot of different roots. I think a lot of different things that led me to where I am today doing this King Cuicatl project.
Right.
And one of them is I started with I've always been interested in pre-Hispanic history.
Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't even realize, but when I look at my childhood, I've got journals filled with like drawings of myself as a sort of an ixiptla, like sort of dressed with like moccasins and pyramids in the back and deserts and stuff.
Right.
My mom has photos of me dressed as dressed that way too for Halloween. Almost every Halloween, I dressed up like sort of a pre-Hispanic.
Right.
Sort of a.
Do you have Native American blood? Just out of curiosity.
I do actually. Yeah. It's possible, and we did travel a bit, and I was exposed a bit to kind of pre-American, kind of like pre-Hispanic culture, but in the U.S.
Right.
This was like Native American culture.
Right. Cool.
And so I'm not really sure. What happened is I'm noticing that I use music to sort of to grow, to kind of like hyper evolve, to develop, and to like expand my sense of who I am and what my reality is. And so literally when I'm working on music, I'm looking for dead space in my brain. I'm looking for kind of unoccupied territory, and I'm using the music to try to kind of push out and sort of expand. That's sort of the movement. So the first album I did was called Tam O'Shanter Remembers the Day, and it's all about a little property. It's literally the Tam O'Shanter was a house,
right?
And so I'm talking about the house. There's a song that represents the house, and then there's a song that represents the front yard, a song for the backyard, a song for the garden, and so I was kind of exploring this little territory.
Right.
Okay, and then my next album was called Race the Portrait of a Town, and that was now a full town. And so I was writing music, trying to flesh out, create a musical version of an entire town. So I went from a little residential property to now a whole town. And when I was working on Race, the portrait of a town, it was strange because I had the sense like, how am I ever going to get out of this project? I was writing song after song after song after song and building this town. And I thought, I think I'm going to be, for the rest of my life, just developing this Race, the portrait of a town, and there'll always be new characters. That project started physically as there was a real town, and then it kind of manifested and became something in my imagination. Right. I was elaborating on that idea with my imagination, so there were new characters, new circumstances, and I just kept expanding this town, and I thought, yeah, how am I ever going to get out of this? And I wrote a song that really shocked me, that for the first time it felt like it didn't belong in that town. I had finally kind of reached the parameter and kind of gone beyond that realm, and that song made me realize that there was more kind of beyond that territory. And so after writing that song, I just started using music to like blast off in every different direction possible. So I was just trying to like, okay, maybe a song can be this, maybe a song can be a sculpture, maybe a song can be a painting, maybe a song can be an animal. Right. And was pushing and pushing and pushing. And so I had all these different categories of songs. One of those categories was like music based in sort of pre-Hispanic history, and I was writing it using these kind of motifs that I saw in like pyramids. Like there was a lot of right angles and a lot of symmetry and a lot of kind of like the generic aesthetic sort of motifs that you see like if you go to like a gift shop in Mesa Verde, like in right. Colorado, right. Kind of like these like dot dot right angle dot dot dot, and I was using these ideas like in like the structure of pyramids and this kind of sense that I was using that as a reference for constructing music. Right. I started making music based on this kind of as this pre-Hispanic history, and then using these visual sort of aesthetic motifs, and in exploring that project, I found the Aztec ritual, this particular ritual that I'm exploring here with King Cuicatl with this project, and I found that ritual, and that opened the door, and then to that whole project, and I started focusing. I kind of dismissed all the rest of the directions, the musical directions I was going in, right. And focused just on this pre-Hispanic, this kind of idea, this Aztec ritual, and I went just full. I have the tendency to just go like, my brain just kind of goes. It's like a hyper focus. I think it's a problem actually.
Is it?
I think it's like a educational, like a handicap. but there was like this tendency to just go 100% into one direction, and in this case, I just went 100% into this Aztec ritual and was writing song after song after song after song, imagining myself in this position. And before I knew it, like I said, it wasn't a decision. Like, oh, this would be interesting to do this. I was just working on the music, kind of just right here, focusing on it. And then I finished the project, and I realized, oh, I just did this whole project based on an Aztec ritual. Now, what do I do with my real life to kind of harbor this idea? What do I need to do to contort my life to give what this project needs? You know, to give right. it birth, to give it a form in the kind of the real world, the music industry, and blah blah blah. Right. And so I realized I need to go to Mexico. I need to learn Spanish. I need to change my life entirely. And so I did that. So I left everything I knew. I left all my friends, my family, all my reference points, my manager, my record label, everything that I had built in New York, and just went to Oaxaca, and I started this strange journey.
Right. So before we continue,
yeah.
What is this ritual exactly? I know you've told me before, but
sure.
For our audience, could you expand a bit of the ritual?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's really kind of bizarre too. So what it is there was there was a year after year the Aztec would fight. There were all these battles, so there were these wars, and what they would do is they would, in this case, they would keeping an eye out for a particular type of young man, and they would collect about 10 of them, these potential young men to kind of play this role, okay? And so they would select about 10, and they would basically audition them, and they had all these characteristics, all these qualifications they had to meet. So they had to be sort of graceful, they had to be good at music, they had to have certain physical dimensions and qualities and things like that. And they, from what I understand, they would sort of kill the ones that they would sort of sacrifice the ones that didn't make it,
Right.
and then they would choose this one particular winner to pretend he was forced to pretend to be Tescalipoca, which is one of the 4 main Aztec gods. And so it was this bizarre circumstance where you have a slave, essentially. He was enslaved, but forced to pretend to be something superhuman, kind of divine. And so he had 1 year of playing this role. So he was dressed as a god, dressed in the image of his Tescalipoca. So he had the feathers in the hair, and he had the finest jewels all over his body, and he was basically paraded around town for this full year. Like I said, he had to be good at music, so he would have played historically like a clay flute, kwee-cot-l, like a pizza. And so for this 1 year, he lived this way. It was basically a life of perfection, a life of bliss, a life of absolute beauty. And like I said, he was paraded, and the people would just marvel at how wonderful this creature was, and him playing his music and dressed beautifully. And he was given all the virgins in the town to sleep with, so did all the greatest food. He slept in the palace and so a life of absolute perfection. And then at the end of that year, they would sacrifice him. So he would march up these temple steps. He had to break one of his pizzas, one of his flutes on each step, and he reached the top, and then he was sacrificed. And in that same moment, they would sort of anoint the new young man that was chosen to do this the following year. And this would happen year after year, this sort of ritual.
This might sound gruesome to American viewers, but the Aztec world was very different, and sacrifices were not meant to be gorier, even bloodier. There was not particular cruelty. It was just part of the religion.
Sure.
Tezcatlipoca was very important indeed. So I imagine it was a great honor for the sacrifice
exactly.
to be presented as Tezcatlipoca.
I imagine that too, and from what I read and from what I've understood, obviously when I started to learn about this this ritual, I went full out and went to all these the libraries all over New York and just was trying to investigate and learn more and more and more. And obviously, that's one of the important points, because we have this sense of what a inhumane thing to do to.
Right.
But yeah, this was considered an honor. And so in my premise, King Cuicatl, what I'm considering is an ixiptla. The ixiptla was the name of this character forced to represent Tescalipoca. And in the project that I'm exploring, he didn't want to die.
Right.
So he was an exception. He was always a foreigner. This person was always taken from outside. So it's possible that maybe he didn't have the same ideals and didn't have the sense of, wow, what a beautiful thing, I'm going to be killed by this Aztec culture and I'll go to the afterlife or whatever. So in my premise, he doesn't want to die, and he's looking for a way to survive the situation. And that's what I'm exploring. The premise of my project is he's trying to see if he can utilize the power of his musical presentations. And so what he's done is, rather than just play the traditional flute, which would have happened year after year, he's dedicated his time to these massive musical presentations, and he's slaved all through the night to build these massive pieces of music, and he's recruited this huge ensemble of people to kind of help. And so his musical presentations, instead of just being some simple hymn on the flute, are these huge moving spectacles with 3 percussionists and a choir and violins and cellos, and I mean obviously those instruments wouldn't have existed at that time, but that's kind of the idea. So he's trying to use his musical presentations to try to survive and try to basically escape. He sees that as the only way out of this situation, where he says, okay, I have 1 year to get out of this situation, and if I'm going to do it, I'm going to have to transform really into a sort of divine creature. And he's being guided he's got this help. So for one thing, he's already dressed as a divine creature. That helps him imagine himself that way. The whole town is participating in this fantasy, pretending that he's a supernatural, creative, transcendent person. And so he's trying to take advantage of this scenario and actually transcend. And he feels like the clock is ticking. He has 1 year to make this transformation. And if he can write good enough music and present it well enough and do everything right, do good interviews, do good photo shoots, try to do everything he can to convince the world around him that he's actually special. He's not just another impersonator, another person pretending to be something special, but is actually valuable and actually
unique.
Unique and actually, yeah, just that he's the one, you know,
Right.
that he can transform into the version of his dreams, the version that he's always hoped he could be. And so he's trying to use his musical performances. He's got 1 year to do this, to make this transformation. And the big Judgment Day would be this ritual where he marches up the temple steps, and they put the obsidian blade, this knife which they historically used to kill him, to make the sacrifices, and to see if he's managed to become impervious to death, I guess.
Right.
Like he's managed to become immortal, and now he can live forever in perfect harmony with.
Right.
You know.
And I guess we can all relate to this sense of, well, the need to be the best versions of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So the music is beautiful. You'll be hearing it soon, and yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to find a greater purpose in our lifetime, right? And it's a beautiful and very poetic idea that through music or an artistic discipline you can transcend this mortal life and become something else entirely, right? Like a divinity.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point, and that's one of the things that I've been trying to sort of explain is that this concept of King Cuicatl, which translated Cuicatl is Nahuatl, the language of the Aztec, and it's song or music. So I'm kind of saying king of music or king of song,
Right.
and that's the name that I'm giving to my own sense of this perfect version of Allan Prey, this perfect version of me. But I feel like everybody has that within themselves, this sense of like what they could be or what they ought to be. And not only human beings, I feel like all living things have that. If you
Right.
bear with me, because everything that's alive has a certain tension, right? There's a certain instability. That's why there's movement. So from the cellular level to everything, things are moving because the plants are growing. I keep adjusting my position here, sitting. We keep blinking our eyes.
Right.
We're doing this because we're searching a sort of a physical stability. We're inherently unstable things, being alive, being living creatures. So there's this instability, and we're seeking stability. We're seeking this sort of harmony, this like absolute sort of harmony. And the King Cuicatl is the name that I've given for my own for this resting point, this
Right.
point of harmony, of total perfection, of total. Yeah, and so I feel like every living thing has their own.
Yeah, I mean,
King Cuicatl.
it's been mentioned in many religions and cultures, right? This duality of life. Because on one hand, living creates chaos.
Uh-huh.
The very fact of being alive creates waste to chaos. But we also seek, like you say, stability, be it physical stability, but also spiritual stability.
Sure.
So, again, I think it's very relatable what your
Yeah.
music
Cool.
is about. And yeah, would you like to tell us anything more to our audience about your project, your coming video concert?
Oh, well, there's a lot to say. I mean, one thing that might be surprising, given what I'm talking about, or what we're talking about, is the presentation that we just did with you guys, with Texas Guitar Society, has music from King Cuicatl and some music that's not from King Cuicatl. So I think we performed 6 pieces, right?
Right.
We did 3 from various projects and 3 from King Cuicatl. And that's because we've recently changed the format. So as I explained to you in the beginning of this talk, that I'm seeing this, I'm seeing how King Cuicatl exists chronologically. I'm seeing that how it's part of this development, this sort of artistic development that I'm searching for, this kind of expansion. And then I started small, got a little bit bigger to a town, and now King Cuicatl, this project is now a way of turning my whole life into my art project.
Right.
So every interview I do, every concert, every presentation is part of this, is now part of my art. So I never have to leave the realm of my art to execute King Cuicatl. So this interview, I'm talking to you as a friend, we're doing this, but this is also serving the concept of King Cuicatl. This is part of King Cuicatl. It's not me setting aside and talking about my project, which is on the side. This is the project. This is King Cuicatl.
So you become your work.
Yeah. Well, I was trying to make a work that would be inescapable. Like I said, I keep looking for more and more space.
Wow.
And keep trying to expand the realm of my art. I guess the idea is to kind of create my own reality to live in.
That sounds
you know?
on the one hand ambitious and on the other scary, I guess.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of ways to interpret it. Yeah, and a psychiatrist would probably have a whole nother scheme.
Right.
But so anyway, this idea of expanding and kind of seeing how King Cuicatl exists in the chronology of my work, starting small, getting bigger, and now turning into like this 4-dimensional project where my whole environment is my art project in some ways. And so I thought it was necessary to kind of take the audience through that trajectory, through that sort of journey. So now when we perform concerts, we start with some of the music from earlier projects. We start with the first album, and I sort of explain what's happening, and then we move on to the next album. And meanwhile, my attire, my costume is kind of morphing and changing and adapting to this process as we move towards King Cuicatl. And then when we reach King Cuicatl, obviously I start like the full experience.
Right.
It sort of opens up. And so what we've done with Texas Guitar Society with this recording is try to take the listener a little bit on that journey too. So there's a bit of music from earlier projects, and then half of the performance is King Cuicatl. So that might be important to understand.
Yeah. And again, the music is beautiful. Don't miss this concert. It's going to be great, and I'm certain great things are on the way for Allan and his ensemble. I must say, on a personal note, my lovely wife performs the violin in this concert. But anyway, enough with the personal notes. Yes, please, we'll keep you posted. Do not miss this concert. I cannot stress this enough. It's wonderful music, played by wonderful musicians, and very well recorded as well. So, yes. Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jose, and very well recorded thanks to you. You did a lot of work, and thanks to your wife, and thanks to all the musicians that I'm working with, Ana Rodriguez, the cellist, Antonio Solano, guitar, Rene Camus, the bass player, whom I'm missing, Santiago Mora,
right.
Percussionist, great musicians. Yeah, I'm really thrilled to be working with them and working with you and doing all this here. It's a real pleasure.
Well, see you next time.